The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle story from Sherlock Holmes. The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. On the second day after Christmas, I went to Holmes's lodgings to wish him a happy new year. He was stretched out on the sofa, wearing a purple dressing gown. Immediately to his right stood a pipe rack, and beside it lay several morning newspapers, folded and evidently recently examined. Near the chair stood a wooden stool, and hanging from the corner of it was an old and battered hat, so worn and torn that it was clearly no longer fit for use. A magnifying glass and a pair of tweezers lay on the seat of the stool, showing that the hat had been placed there for examination. "I see that you are busy," I said. "I won't disturb you." "Not at all, not at all. It is very pleasant to have a friend with whom I can discuss my conclusions. The matter is of the most trifling nature." He pointed with his finger to the old hat. "Still, there are some points connected with it which are not entirely devoid of interest, and may even be instructive." I sat down and warmed my hands at the crackling fire. Outside it was bitterly cold, and the window panes were covered with frost. "Although it seems trivial, I'm sure it has an interesting story," I said. "That hat must be a clue which you intend to use to solve some mystery or clear up a crime." "No, no. There is no crime here," said Sherlock Holmes, laughing. "It is merely one of those odd incidents which may happen any day in a city where 4 million human beings are continually jostling one another within a few square miles. In such a hive of humanity, anything may occur, and very few events amount to crimes. Some are curious and bizarre without being criminal." "You are right," I replied. "Of the last 6 cases which I have recorded, 3 were not in any way criminal." "Strictly speaking, you refer to my attempt to recover Irene Adler's document, the curious case of Miss Mary Sutherland, and the adventure of the man with the twisted lip. This little matter, I think, may be classed in the same innocent category. You know Peterson, do you not? The commissionaire at the hotel?" "I know him." "Well, this is his trophy." "His hat, then?" "No, no. He found it. We do not know the owner. I want you to regard it not as an old hat, but as a problem. Let me tell you how it came here. It arrived on Christmas morning, together with a plump goose which, I have no doubt, is at this moment being cooked in Peterson's house. Our honest Peterson was returning home about 4 o'clock in the morning after some festive celebration. He was making his way along Tottenham Court Road when he noticed a man in front of him walking with a slight limp. By the light of the street lamps, he could see that the man was carrying a plump goose slung over his shoulder. When he reached the corner of Goodge Street, a group of roughs began to quarrel with the man. One of them struck him and knocked his hat to the ground. The man raised his stick to defend himself, but in doing so, accidentally smashed the window of a shop behind him. At that moment, Peterson rushed forward to rescue the man from the gang. Seeing a uniformed figure running toward him, the stranger mistook Peterson for a policeman, dropped the goose, and took to his heels, disappearing into the labyrinth of back streets off Tottenham Court Road. The roughs also made off, leaving Peterson alone with the spoils of the battlefield, this battered hat and the plump Christmas goose. He returned them to the owner, I presume. That is precisely the difficulty, my dear fellow. From a small card attached to the goose's left leg, we know that it was addressed to Mrs. Henry Baker. Inside the hat, the initials H.B. are clearly marked. But in a city of this size, there are thousands of Bakers and hundreds of Henry Bakers. So, it is no easy matter to identify the owner. What did Peterson do then? Knowing my fondness for even the smallest problems, he brought both the hat and the goose to me on Christmas morning. We kept the goose until this morning, but despite the cold weather, it could not be preserved any longer. So Peterson was obliged to take it home and cook it. Meanwhile, I have been sitting here pondering over the hat of the unfortunate man who lost his Christmas dinner. Did the man not advertise in the newspapers? No. Then how do you propose to discover his identity? Only by what we can learn from this. From a hat. Precisely. You must be joking. What clue could you possibly get from that old hat? My magnifying glass is here, and you know my methods. Let us see what conclusions you can draw from it. I took the battered hat in my hands and turned it over. It was a commonplace hat, worn and shabby. The red silk lining was much faded. There was no maker's name, but, as Holmes had remarked, the initials HB were plainly visible on one side. There were holes for a hat cord, but the cord itself was missing. It was dusty, old, and riddled with wear. The discolored patches had been covered over with ink. "I can see nothing," I said, handing it back to my friend. "On the contrary, Watson, you can see everything. You simply fail to draw conclusions from what you see. You are too timid in your deductions. Then tell me what conclusions you have drawn." Taking the hat, he examined it with his peculiar introspective manner. "It might have yielded more information," he said, "but even so, I can deduce several obvious facts. The man is highly intellectual. 3 years ago, he was fairly well off, but now his circumstances have greatly declined. He is no longer as careful as he once was. This suggests moral deterioration, probably due to drink, which has led to his financial ruin. His wife has probably ceased to love him for the same reason. My dear Holmes," ignoring my protest, he continued, "however, he has not entirely lost his self-respect. He leads a sedentary life and rarely leaves his house. He is extremely unfit physically. He is middle-aged, his hair is graying. He had his hair cut a day or two ago, and he uses lime juice on it. It is also likely that he has no gas laid on in his house." "You are surely joking, Holmes." "I'm quite serious. Even after hearing my conclusions, do you still fail to see how I arrived at them? I confess myself an imbecile. Still, I must admit that I cannot follow your reasoning. For example, how did you deduce that the man is intellectual?" Holmes placed the hat upon his head. It came down over his forehead and nearly to the bridge of his nose. "From its size," he said, "a man with so large a brain must have something in it. And how do you know that he has fallen on hard times? This hat is 3 years old. These curled brims were fashionable then. It is of the best quality. See the silk band and the excellent lining. If a man could afford such a hat 3 years ago and has bought no new one since, his finances must have declined. So far, so good. But how do you know that he was once careful and has now deteriorated morally?" Holmes laughed and pointed to the hole in the brim. "Here is the evidence of foresight. Hats are not sold like this. A man who has a hat cord fitted to prevent it from blowing away shows care and prudence. But the cord is gone, and he has not replaced it. That shows a change in character. The ink stains, which he has tried to conceal, show that he has not entirely lost his self-respect. Your deductions are certainly logical. If you examine the lining carefully, you will see evidence that he is middle-aged, that his gray hair has recently been cut, and that he uses lime juice. Under the magnifying glass, you can see hairs which have clearly been cut by a barber. They are matted together, and the lining smells faintly of lime. The dust on the hat is fine and brown, not the coarse gray dust of the streets, which shows that it has been hanging indoors for a long time. The stains inside show that the man sweats freely, therefore he is out of condition. And what about the wife? You said she no longer loves him. This hat has not been brushed for weeks. If I saw your wife allow you to go out with a week's accumulation of dust on your hat, I should conclude that she no longer cared for you. But perhaps he is a bachelor. No, he was taking the goose as a peace offering to his wife. Besides, remember what was written on the card tied to the goose's leg. You have an answer for everything. But how did you know that he has no gas in his house? There are several drops of candle wax on the hat. 1 or 2 might be accidental, but 5 show habitual use. He must often have gone upstairs at night with his hat in one hand and a candle in the other. If he had gas, these wax marks would not be there. Are you satisfied? Highly ingenious, I said, laughing. But if, as you say, there is no crime involved and no loss except a missing goose, Are not all these efforts rather wasted? Sherlock Holmes was about to reply when the door burst open and Peterson, the commissionaire, rushed in, his cheeks flushed and his face full of amazement. "The goose, Mr. Holmes." "The goose, sir," he cried, gasping for breath. "What about it? Has it come to life and flown out of the window?" Holmes turned on the sofa to get a better look at the excited man. "Look at this, sir. My wife found it in the goose's crop." He opened his hand, and there, gleaming brilliantly in the center of his palm, lay a blue stone. It was somewhat smaller than a bean, but of such intense color that it seemed to shine by its own light in the dark hollow of his hand. Sherlock Holmes whistled and sat upright. "Good heavens, Peterson!" he exclaimed. "This is a treasure that seeks its owner. You know what you have there, I presume. It must be a diamond, a precious stone. It could cut glass like dough. More than that. Far more valuable. Surely it is the blue carbuncle of the Countess of Morcar." I cried. "Precisely. I know its size and shape from the constant advertisements in the Times during the last few days. It is a unique gem. Its value cannot be exactly estimated, but the reward of £1,000 offered for its recovery is scarcely a 20th of its worth." £1,000! cried the commissionaire. "My God!" He sank into a chair, staring from Holmes to me in bewilderment. "That is the reward, but I suspect that the Countess has a strong sentimental attachment to the jewel and would gladly part with half her fortune to recover it. If I remember correctly, it was lost at the Cosmopolitan Hotel," I said. "Exactly 5 days ago, on the 22nd of December. A plumber named John Horner was accused of stealing it from the Countess's jewel case. The evidence against him was very strong, and the case has already gone to court. It was reported somewhere here." He shuffled through the newspapers, found a relevant one, and read aloud. "Jewel robbery at the Cosmopolitan Hotel. John Horner, age 26, a plumber, has been charged with stealing the jewel known as the blue carbuncle from the jewel case of the Countess of Morcar on the 22nd instant. James Ryder, the Countess's head attendant, stated that he admitted Horner to the Countess's dressing room to fix a loose grate. After remaining with him for a short time, Ryder left the room on other business, and on returning found Horner gone. He observed that the bureau had been forced open and that the richly ornamented box in which the jewel was kept lay empty upon the dressing table. Ryder at once gave the alarm, and Horner was arrested the same evening. Despite thorough searches, the jewel was not found on him or in his lodgings. The Countess's maid, Catherine Cusack, confirmed Ryder's account. Inspector Bradstreet of B Division stated that Horner had violently resisted arrest and vehemently protested his innocence. Owing to his previous conviction for theft, the magistrate declined to deal summarily with the case and committed it for trial. During the proceedings, Horner showed extreme emotion and fainted upon hearing the decision. "A case for the jury," said Holmes thoughtfully, laying down the paper. "Our task is to trace the missing links in this chain, which begins with the jewel case and ends in the crop of a goose on Tottenham Court Road. Watson, as you see, our small deductions are leading us into a far more serious and far less innocent matter. The stone is now in our possession. We know that it came from the goose, and that both the goose and the hat belong to the man whom I have described to you, Mr. Henry Baker. Our next step is to find this man and learn his role in this extraordinary affair. We shall begin by advertising in the newspapers. If that fails, we must try other methods. What will you write in the advertisement? Give me pen and paper. This is what I shall write. A black hat and a goose belonging to Mr. Henry Baker were found at the corner of Goode Street. He may recover his lost property by calling at 221B, Baker Street this evening at 6:30. That is clear and precise enough. But will the man see the advertisement? A poor man who has lost so much will certainly keep an eye on the newspapers. He was badly frightened when he broke the window and saw Peterson running toward him. but by now he will have recovered his senses and will be regretting the loss of his goose. Even if he does not see the advertisement himself, someone who knows him surely will and will inform him. Here you are, Peterson. Take this to the advertising office and have it published in the evening editions. Which newspapers, sir? The Globe, the Star, the Pall Mall, the St. James's, the Evening News, the Standard, the Echo, and any others you can think of. Very good, sir. And what about this stone? Ah, yes. I shall keep it. And on your way back, buy us another goose, for we shall have to replace the one that you have eaten with a fresh one for the owner. After the commissionaire had gone, Holmes held the jewel up to the light and spoke. A magnificent thing, he said. Look at the way it gleams. Of course, many crimes have been committed for its sake. That is the fate of all great precious stones. They are the devil's bait. There is scarcely one of the older and larger jewels which has not had a bloody history. This stone, however, is comparatively new. It was found 20 years ago on the banks of the Amoy River in southern China. It has all the qualities of a ruby, except that its color is blue instead of deep red. What a history it has already had in its short life. For this crystallized bit of carbon, weighing scarcely 2.5 grams, 2 men have been murdered. Acid has been thrown in one person's face, and another has committed suicide. Is it not an object which opens the door to the gallows and the prison? I shall lock in my safe and telegraph the Countess to inform her of the recovery. Do you think Horner is innocent? I cannot say. And does Henry Baker have anything to do with the matter? I believe Henry Baker to be entirely innocent and unaware that he was carrying something far more valuable than its weight in solid gold. Still, he must answer the advertisement before we can be certain. I shall put him to a little test. Is there nothing you can do meanwhile? No. Then I shall go and attend to my patients. I will try to be back in time this evening, for I am anxious to see how this curious affair is to be unraveled. I shall be glad of your company. I dine at 7. I believe there is woodcock on the menu. After all that has happened, I may ask Mrs. Hudson to examine what comes out of the bird. I was detained longer than expected by one of my patients, and it was a little after 6 when I reached Baker Street. As I approached the house, I noticed a tall man waiting in the semicircle of light cast by the fanlight over the door. He wore a Scotch bonnet and a coat buttoned up to his chin. As I reached the door, it opened, and we entered together. Holmes rose from his chair and assumed his cordial manner. You must be Mr. Henry Baker, he said. Pray take a seat near the fire. It is very cold outside, and from what I can see, your clothing is hardly suited to winter weather. You're just in time, Watson. Is this your hat, Mr. Baker? Yes, sir. It is indeed mine. He had broad, rounded shoulders, an enormous head, a wide, intelligent-looking face, and a fringe of grizzled brown beard upon his chin. The redness of his nose and cheeks, and the slight tremor of the hand which he extended, recalled to Holmes the deductions he had made about the man. His coat was buttoned up to the top, and the turned-up collar failed to cover his long, thin wrists. From the bareness of his wrists, it was clear that he wore no shirt beneath. He chose his words carefully and spoke slowly. He was evidently a man of education who had fallen upon evil days. We kept these things for some days, expecting that you would advertise for them, said Holmes. I confess that I was surprised that you did not do so. Our visitor smiled sheepishly. I'm not as well off as I once was, he said. Besides, I thought that the ruffians who attacked me had taken both my hat and my goose. I gave them up for lost and did not wish to spend money unnecessarily. Quite understandable. As for the goose, we were obliged to eat it. What? You ate it? The visitor sprang up in alarm. Yes, it would have spoiled otherwise. But I trust that the goose which you see upon that sideboard will serve your purpose. It is perfectly fresh and of about the same size as your own. Oh, certainly, certainly, replied Mr. Baker with a sigh of relief. The feathers, legs, crop, and so on of your goose are still here, if you wish to. The man burst into hearty laughter. "They might serve as souvenirs of my adventure," he said, "but I have no wish to take away the remains. With your permission, I shall take the excellent goose on the sideboard and be on my way." Sherlock Holmes shrugged his shoulders and shot me a keen glance. "Here is your hat, and here is your goose," said he. "If you have no objection, may I ask where you obtained the goose on that occasion? I am something of a connoisseur in geese, and I seldom come across one like yours." "Certainly, sir," said Baker, tucking the goose under his arm. "A few friends and I frequent the Alpha Bar near the museum. As you may imagine, we spend much of our time in the museum during the day. This year, the owner of the Alpha Bar, a man named Windigate, ran a promotion and supplied us with geese on weekly installments of a penny or two. I paid my installments regularly and thus obtained my goose. You know the rest of the story. I am deeply obliged to you, sir, for the Scotch bonnet was neither suited to my age nor to my head." With a humorous and jaunty salute, he took his leave. "That is all we shall get from him," said Holmes, closing the door behind him. "The man knows nothing. Are you hungry, Watson?" "Not particularly." "Then I propose that we follow the trail while it is still fresh and postpone dinner." Agreed. The air was bitterly cold, so we donned our coats and wrapped our scarves around our necks. The sky was clear and full of stars, and clouds of steam rose from people's mouths in the frosty air, as though 100 pistols were being fired at once. We left the house and passed through Wimpole Street and Harley Street, then along Wigmore Street to Oxford Street. As we walked slowly, swaying from side to side, the frozen snow crackled beneath our feet. In 15 minutes, we reached the Alpha Bar in Bloomsbury, a small establishment on the corner of one of the streets leading down to Holborn. Holmes pushed open the door and ordered 2 beers from the red-cheeked landlord in a white apron. "I trust that your beer is as good as your geese," said Holmes. "My geese?" the man asked in surprise. "Yes. I was speaking to one of the men to whom you sold the goose not half an hour ago. Henry Baker." "Oh, that matter. Those geese were not mine." "Indeed? Whose were they, then?" "I bought 2 dozen from a dealer in Covent Garden. I know some of the dealers there." "From whom did you buy them?" "From Breckenridge." "I do not know him." "Your health and prosperity, sir. Good night." We stepped once more into the freezing air. "Now we are off to see Mr. Breckenridge," said Holmes, buttoning up his coat. "Remember this, Watson. Though at one end of this affair there is a mere goose, at the other end there is a man who may face 7 years' imprisonment unless his innocence can be proved. Our investigation may show him to be guilty, but in any case we possess a clue which the police do not. We must follow it to the end. Come along, we are going south." We passed through Holborn, walked the length of Endell Street, and by a series of winding back streets reached Covent Garden Market. On one of the largest stalls the name Breckenridge was displayed. Behind it stood a man with sharp features and neatly trimmed long side whiskers, with a horse-like appearance, assisted by a young lad who was helping him put up the shutters. "Good evening. Cold night, isn't it?" said Holmes. The man nodded and looked curiously at my friend. Pointing to the empty marble slabs, Holmes remarked, "You have no geese left. Come tomorrow morning and I'll give you 500. Tomorrow will not do. But look, there are a few geese on that stall over there with the lamp." "Yes, but we were recommended to you." "Who recommended me?" "The owner of the Alpha Bar." "Ah, yes. I sent him 2 dozen. They were very fine geese." "Where did you get them from?" The sudden outburst of anger which this question provoked surprised me. Planting his hands on his hips and thrusting his head forward like a fighting cock, the dealer said, "Very well, sir. What are you after?" "Don't beat about the bush." "I'm not beating about the bush. I simply wish to know where you got the geese which you sold to the Alpha Bar." "Then I refuse to tell you." "Any objections?" "None at all. That is entirely your affair. But I cannot understand why you should take such offense at so small a question." "Small? You would feel the same if people pestered you. When I buy goods and pay for them, the matter ends there. But if someone keeps coming and asking, as if there were no other geese in the world, Where are the geese now? Who did you sell them to? Where did you get them from? It would get on your nerves too. Confounded geese. I know nothing about other people, said Holmes indifferently. But if you will not tell us, a little wager which we made with some friends falls through. I know something about geese, and I would wager 5 shillings that the goose we ate was a country-bred bird. Then you have lost your wager, said the dealer curtly, for it was not a country goose. It was not. I would stake my life on it. I was brought up among geese. Do you suppose you know more about them than I do? I tell you the geese that went to the Alpha Bar were not country-bred. You cannot convince me. Will you take a wager? You will be throwing away your money, for I am certain it was a country goose. Still, if you like, I will wager a sovereign just to teach you the dangers of obstinacy. The dealer grinned maliciously. Bill, bring the books, he said. The boy placed a small, thin notebook and a large ledger, stained with grease beneath the lamp. Come along, Mr. Know-all, said the dealer. I thought I'd sold all my geese, but it seems I have one more left to pluck. Do you see this small book? Yes. What of it? It contains a list of the people from whom I buy my stock. You see here the list of the country folk. Each name has a number corresponding to its place in the big ledger. Do you see that page written in red ink? That is the list of the townspeople I buy from. Now, will you kindly read the third name on that page for me? Holmes read aloud. Mrs. Oakshott, 117, Brixton Road, 249. Correct. Now look for the same name in the large ledger. Holmes turned to the indicated page. Here it is. Mrs. Oakshott, 117, Brixton Road, supplier of eggs and poultry. Very good. And what does it say in the last column? On December 22nd, 24 geese were purchased at 7 shillings apiece. Excellent. And what is written beneath that? Sold to Mr. Windigate of the Alpha Bar at 12 shillings each. What do you make of that? Sherlock Holmes looked deeply disappointed. He took a sovereign from his pocket and tossed it onto the counter, then turned away with an expression of indescribable sadness. After walking a few yards, he stopped beside a lamp-post and, in his characteristic silent manner, burst into hearty laughter. If you ever see a man with whiskers like that and a sporting paper sticking out of his pocket, you may be sure that you can make a bet with him. I might have offered him £100, and he would not have given me that information, but once it came to betting, the fellow forgot everything. As far as I can see, Watson, we are very close to solving this case. The only question now is whether we shall visit Mrs. Oakshott tonight or wait until morning. Judging from that man's temper, there are others interested in this matter as well. That is why I think. The crash and clatter from the stall we had just left prevented Holmes from finishing his sentence. Turning back, we saw a rat-faced fellow standing in the full glare of the hanging lamp. The vendor, Breckenridge, stood at the entrance of his stall, fists clenched, glaring at the sneering man. "I've had enough of you and your geese," he shouted. "The lot of you can go to hell. If you bother me again with these idiotic questions, I'll set the dog on you. If you want Mrs. Oakshott so badly, bring her here and I'll tell her. What's it got to do with you anyway? Did I buy the goose from you?" "But one of them was my goose," the man muttered. "Then go and ask Mrs. Oakshott. She told me to ask you. Then I say go and ask the King of Prussia. That's enough. Get out." As the vendor lunged forward angrily, the other man slipped away into the darkness. "That may save us the trouble of going to Brixton Road," Holmes whispered. "Come, let's see who this man is." We pushed our way through the crowd around the illuminated stalls and quickly caught up with the small man. When Sherlock Holmes touched his shoulder, the man started violently and turned around. In the gaslight, I could see his face change color. "Who are you? What do you want?" he asked in a trembling voice. "Excuse me," Holmes said gently, "but I overheard your conversation with the vendor just now. I believe I may be able to help you." "You? Who are you? What would you possibly know about this?" "My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what other people do not. But it's impossible for you to know anything about this. On the contrary, I know everything about it. You are looking for the geese sold by Mrs. Oakshott of Brixton Road to a vendor named Breckenridge, who in turn sold them to Mr. Windigate, proprietor of the Alpha Bar, a regular customer of Mr. Henry Baker. The small man threw out his arms and cried with trembling fingers, "You are the very man I have been searching for. You cannot imagine how important this matter is to me." Sherlock Holmes hailed a passing cab. "Then let us discuss it in a warm room instead of this icy marketplace," he said. "But before we set off, may I ask whom I have the honor of assisting?" After a moment's hesitation, the man averted his eyes and said, "My name is John Robinson." No, Holmes replied kindly. "Ask for your real name. I have little fondness for aliases." The man's pale cheeks flushed crimson. "Very well," he said. "My real name is James Ryder." "Precisely. Chief engineer at the Cosmopolitan Hotel. Please get into the cab, and I shall explain everything you wish to know." The small man looked from Holmes to me with eyes full of fear and hope. Was fortune about to smile upon him, or was disaster approaching? He could not be sure. Nevertheless, he entered the cab, and within half an hour we arrived at our rooms in Baker Street. Not a word was spoken during the journey, but from his broken breathing and the way he kept clasping and unclasping his hands, it was clear that he was extremely agitated. When we entered the room, Holmes exclaimed cheerfully, "Here we are. A fire like this is a great blessing in such weather. You look chilled, Mr. Ryder. Pray take the wicker chair. I'll just slip into my slippers before solving your little problem. Yes, there we are. You are curious about the fate of the geese, are you not?" "Yes, sir. In fact, I believe you're not interested in all of them, only in one. The one with the black mark on its tail." Ryder started violently. "Yes, sir," he cried. "Can you tell me where it went?" "It came here." "Here?" "Yes. I have never seen such a bird before." "No wonder you pursued it so eagerly, for even after it was dead, it laid an egg the like of which I have never seen. The most magnificent and brilliant egg imaginable. I placed this small egg in my museum." Our visitor sprang to his feet, but his legs failed him, and he clutched the mantelpiece to keep from falling. Holmes opened a case and produced the blue carbuncle. The jewel sparkled with cold light in every direction. Ryder stared at it with a miserable expression, uncertain whether to claim it or deny it. "The game is up, Ryder," Holmes said calmly. "Hold on, or you'll fall into the fireplace. Help him to the chair, Watson." His heart was hardly strong enough to bear the punishment due to such a crime. "Give him a little brandy to revive him." The man staggered and nearly collapsed, but the brandy brought some color back to his face. At last he sat down and gazed at Holmes with terrified eyes. "I have every link of the chain and all the evidence I need. Still, there are 1 or 2 points missing. Had you ever heard of the Countess of Morker's blue carbuncle before?" "I heard of it from Catherine Cusack," he said hoarsely. "Of course, the Countess's maid. The temptation of easy money must have been too great for you, so that despite never having attempted anything of the sort before, you committed this villainy. You knew Horner had a criminal record, and that suspicion would fall upon him. What did you do? You arranged repairs in the Countess's room with your accomplice Cusack. Since you were the chief engineer, you sent Horner to do the work. After he left the room, you stole the jewel and raised the alarm, having the poor fellow arrested. And then, Ryder suddenly threw himself to the floor and clasped my friend's feet. "For God's sake, have mercy," he cried. "If not for me, then for my mother and father. Think of their sorrow. I have never done such a thing in my life. I never will again. I swear it on the Bible. Please don't give me up. For Christ's sake, get up," Holmes said sternly. "You kneel now, but you should have thought of that when you were falsely accusing the innocent Horner. I'll run away, Mr. Holmes. I'll leave the country. The case will collapse. That we can consider later. Now tell me, what did you do after stealing the jewel? How did it get into the goose? How did the goose reach the market? Don't think of lying. for your only hope lies in telling me the truth." Ryder moistened his dry lips and began to speak. "I will tell you everything exactly as it happened, sir. When Horner was arrested, I decided it would be best to leave the hotel at once, since they might search me in my room at any moment. I would not be safe there. Using the excuse of an errand, I left the hotel and went toward my sister's house. She is married to a man named Oakshott, and they earn their living by raising geese and selling them at the market. I thought everyone I met was a policeman or a detective. Though the weather was freezing, I was drenched in sweat. When I arrived at their house on Brixton Road, my sister asked what was wrong and why I looked so pale. I told her the theft at the hotel had shaken me badly. Then I went into the back garden, smoked a pipe, and tried to think. I remembered a conversation I once had with a friend named Maudsley, who had gone astray and ended up in Pentonville, about how thieves dispose of stolen goods. I was sure Maudsley would not betray me, since I knew a few small secrets of his. My decision was made. I would go to Kilburn and confide in him. He could tell me how to turn the jewel into cash. But how could I travel with the jewel on me? It had been hard enough getting from the hotel to my sister's house. I might be searched at any moment, and they would find the stone in my waistcoat pocket. As I stood watching the geese wandering about my feet, a brilliant idea struck me, one that might deceive even the cleverest detectives. Weeks earlier, my sister had promised me a goose for Christmas, and she always kept her word. I could take my goose at once and hide the jewel inside it, then carry it safely to Kilburn. I dragged one of the geese behind the small shed in the garden, a large white goose with brown markings on its tail. I caught it and forced its beak open, pushing the blue carbuncle as far down its throat as my finger could reach. When the bird swallowed, I knew the stone had gone down, but the goose struggled violently, and my sister, hearing the noise, came to see what was happening. At that moment, the goose broke free from my grasp and ran back among the others. "What are you doing with that goose, Jem?" she asked. "Well," I said, "you know you promised me a goose for Christmas. I was just seeing which was the fattest." "Oh," she said, "we've already set yours aside, the big white one there. We call it Jem's goose. We have 26 geese, one for you, one for us, and the remaining 2 dozen go to market." "Thank you, Maggie," I said, "but if you don't mind, I'd rather take the one I had just now. But the other one is a pound or a pound and a half heavier. We raised it especially for you." "Never mind. I want the one I had before, and I want it now." She was a little hurt, but did not object. "As you wish," she said. "Which one do you want?" "The white one with the marked tail, standing there in the middle." "Very well. Kill it and take it." I did so and carried it to Kilburn. I told my friend everything without reserve, for he was someone I trusted in such matters. He laughed until he cried. Then we cut open the goose, but there was no stone. I realized what a dreadful mistake I had made. Leaving the goose behind, I ran back to my sister's house. When I reached the garden, the geese were gone. "What happened to the geese, Maggie?" I cried. "We sent them to the vendor, Jim." "Which vendor?" "Breckenridge at Covent Garden." "Was there another goose among them like mine, with a marked tail?" "Yes, Jim. We had 2 geese with marked tails. They looked so alike that even I couldn't tell them apart." I understood everything then. I rushed to Breckenridge, but he said he had sold the geese and would not say to whom. "You heard it yourself tonight. He always turned me away. My sister thinks I am going mad. Sometimes I think so too. And now, after selling my honor and reputation for this fortune, I am branded a thief without ever laying hands on it. God help me! God help me!" He buried his face in his hands and sobbed uncontrollably. A long silence followed, broken only by the man's heavy breathing and the occasional tapping of Holmes's fingers on the table. Then my friend rose and opened the door. "Get out," he said. "Sir, God bless you." "Not a word. Get out." The man had no desire to say more. He sprang up, rushed down the stairs, and fled into the street. We could hear his footsteps echoing away. As Holmes reached for his porcelain pipe, he said, "After all, It is not my duty to help the police patch up their cases. If Horner were still in danger, I would have acted differently, but this fellow can no longer testify against him, and the case will collapse. I may have allowed a crime to go unpunished, but I may also have saved a man's life from ruin. He was frightened enough to keep him from ever committing another crime. If we sent him to prison, he would waste his life there. Besides, this is a time for mercy. Fate presented us with a most strange and curious problem, and our only reward has been the pleasure of solving it. Doctor, if you would be kind enough to ring the bell, we may begin another investigation, this time involving a bird.